It all started on an ordinary Thursday morning, the kind of morning where you expect the day to be just like any other. The sun was filtering through the thin curtains of my modest apartment, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee was tempting me to stay in bed just a little longer. But today, my life was about to take a turn so bizarre, so utterly improbable, that even my wildest dreams would have seemed mundane compared to what awaited me. I had been invited to a prestigious gala in London, an event so exclusive that I had almost convinced myself I didn't belong there. The invitation was formal, embossed with gold lettering, promising an evening of elegance and refinement. I had pictured the crowd, the laughter, the small talk, the polite clinking of champagne glasses, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. The grand hall of the palace was breathtaking. Chandeliers hung like constellations, their crystal prisms scattering light across the high ceilings. Waiters glided silently across the marble floors, carrying trays of delicacies that looked too beautiful to eat. Guests in black tie attire murmured softly to one another, a symphony of cultured voices in a space designed to impress. And then I saw her, the Queen. Not through a haze of security barriers, not from a distance. She was right there, descending a staircase with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. Her presence commanded silence, yet her smile was warm, as though she noticed every single person in the room. My heart thumped violently in my chest, a drum announcing my own insignificance against the grandeur of royalty. Somehow, the world slowed. Every step she took seemed calculated yet effortless. And then, as if the universe itself had a sense of humor, I found myself standing directly in her path, a human obstacle in an otherwise perfect procession. "Excuse me, sir," a soft voice said. I turned, expecting a security officer, but instead, I found her eyes upon me. The Queen. Eyes. They were kind, but there was a sparkle, an unspoken question that made my knees weak. Before I could apologize or bow properly, she gestured gently to the chair beside her. "Don't get up, stay here," she said, her voice both commanding and intimate, as if she had plucked the words straight from my chaotic thoughts. My brain short-circuited. Stay here. Beside the Queen. How could anyone process such a moment without losing their mind entirely? Yet, somehow, I obeyed. I sat down, heart racing, palms sweating, feeling the entire room shrink to a single focus, this surreal encounter. The murmurs around us quieted. Guests glanced with disbelief, whispers buzzing like an electric current. Cameras clicked discreetly, but no one dared to disrupt the rare, fragile bubble of proximity I had somehow stumbled into. The Queen looked at me with an expression that seemed to say, "Relax, you are safe here." And in that instant, a strange calm washed over me. My ordinary life, my mundane worries, felt absurdly distant. I had no idea that this single, accidental seat beside the Queen would spiral into an evening that challenged everything I thought I knew about privilege, humanity, and fate itself. Little did I know, I was about to witness secrets that were meant for no ordinary eyes, secrets that would unravel the very fabric of my understanding and change me forever. And so, with a shaky breath and a heart pounding like a wild drum, I began the most extraordinary night of my life. The initial shock of sitting beside the Queen had barely settled when the subtle hum of the grand hall began to fade into the background. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and shallow, as if each inhale reminded me that I was, impossibly, here. Her presence was both comforting and intimidating. The aura of decades of wisdom radiated from her, and yet there was a playfulness in her eyes that invited conversation, curiosity, and even mischief. "So," she began softly, "tell me, how did you find yourself in this little predicament?" Her voice, though calm, carried an undertone of amusement. I swallowed hard, my tongue suddenly heavy. I think I just lost my way," I stammered. The words sounded pitiful even to my own ears, but she only smiled. "Lost your way, or were you meant to find it?" she said, leaning slightly closer, her eyes twinkling with a question that seemed rhetorical, yet insistent. It was a paradox of royalty, commanding, yet unexpectedly intimate. I felt exposed, as if my very thoughts were transparent. And perhaps they were, for she continued, "You know, the world often forgets that we, too, are human. Even in places like this, in gowns and glittering halls, we feel the same doubts, the same fears." Her words were oddly soothing, a lull in the storm of my panic. Slowly, I began to relax, my heartbeat easing into a rhythm I could tolerate. I noticed the subtle details around us, the delicate embroidery of her gown, the faint perfume that seemed to carry centuries of tradition, the way her hand rested lightly on the armrest, poised yet relaxed. Suddenly, a hush fell over the hall. All eyes seemed to pivot in our direction. Guests whispered, discreetly reaching for cameras, their curiosity barely contained. It felt like the universe was holding its breath alongside me. The Queen, however, did not flinch. Instead, she glanced at me and whispered, almost conspiratorially, "It seems someone wants to see if we are truly human. Shall we entertain them?" Before I could even respond, she leaned back slightly, and a servant approached with a silver tray. On it was a single, ornate envelope, sealed with a wax crest. She picked it up, handed it to me, and said, "Consider this a small initiation into a world few ever glimpse. Open it, if you dare." My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, written in meticulous calligraphy, outlining instructions, warnings, and hints of secret chambers within the palace, rooms that were never spoken of, events that were witnessed only by a chosen few. The thrill of danger mixed with disbelief. It was as though fate itself had decided to test me. The Queen watched closely, her expression unreadable but encouraging. "Curiosity is a gift, but caution is wisdom," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. I nodded, too stunned to speak, but my mind was already racing, imagining hidden passageways, silent corridors, and the clandestine whispers of history. The rest of the evening unfolded like a dream, or perhaps a carefully orchestrated performance. Every gesture, every glance from the Queen, hinted at stories untold, secrets lingering behind polished doors. I realized then that my accidental seat was not mere coincidence. It was an invitation, an unspoken challenge, to step beyond ordinary life and witness a world hidden in plain sight. By the end of the night, I understood something profound. Proximity to power reveals not just the grandeur of status, but the vulnerabilities and humanity that lie beneath. The Queen, regal yet approachable, mysterious yet transparent, had shown me that even in the most dazzling surroundings, the human heart remains the same. Little did I know, this evening was only the beginning. The letter, the whispered warnings, and the inexplicable sense of destiny were all threads of a tapestry that would unravel in ways I could not yet imagine. My ordinary life had ended the moment I accepted that accidental seat beside. The Queen and a journey into a world of intrigue, secrets, and unimaginable revelations had just begun. The next hours seemed to blur the line between reality and a story I had only ever read in novels. The Queen, with her gentle authority, led me through corridors that shimmered with history, each hallway whispering the secrets of centuries. The letter in my hands now felt like a key, an invitation to witness what no ordinary guest ever would. "Follow me closely," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, yet commanding enough that I didn't dare lag behind. We passed portraits of monarchs long gone, their eyes seeming to follow our every step, and tapestries that depicted battles and celebrations alike, each stitch a testament to legacy and power. Suddenly, she stopped before a door, plain and unassuming, yet its presence radiated importance. She turned to me, her gaze intense. "Beyond this door lies knowledge and choices that few ever face. Are you prepared to see what most never will?" I nodded, though uncertainty churned within me. She smiled, not with mockery, but with an understanding that transcended explanation. Gently, she pushed the door open, revealing a dimly lit chamber, lined with shelves of ancient manuscripts, artifacts, and maps marked with cryptic symbols. The air smelled of old parchment and candle wax. I felt both awe and trepidation as my eyes scanned the treasures. It was like stepping into a time capsule that contained the very heartbeat of history itself. And in the center of the room, on a pedestal, rested a small chest, exquisitely carved. "This," she said softly, "is the truth that the world outside these walls can never comprehend. It is both a gift and a responsibility." She gestured for me to approach. As I did, the chest seemed to hum with an energy that made my hair stand on end. I lifted the lid carefully, revealing a collection of items, letters from historical figures, artifacts that held symbolic power, and a diary filled with personal reflections of those who had walked these corridors before us. My hand shook as I realized the magnitude of what I held. Every object told a story of courage, betrayal, loyalty, and love. The Queen watched me quietly, as if reading my mind. History is not merely what is recorded. It is also what is preserved in secrecy, in whispers, in actions taken away from the eyes of the world. And now, you are part of it. Your choices here will echo beyond this room, even beyond your understanding. A chill ran down my spine. The weight of this responsibility was almost unbearable, yet exhilarating. Here I was, an ordinary man thrust into extraordinary circumstances, standing at the threshold of knowledge and destiny. As the evening wore on, she shared stories, some heartbreaking, some inspiring, some shocking. Tales of courage and sacrifice that had never been spoken aloud. I realized that my accidental seat beside the Queen was not an accident at all. It was fate, carefully woven, testing my character, my judgment, and my ability to understand the fragility and strength of power. By the time we returned to the main hall, I was no longer the same person who had walked in earlier. My mind was alight with thoughts, possibilities, and questions. The Queen looked at me one last time before we parted, her eyes reflecting a mixture of trust and expectation. Little did I know that the events of this night were merely the beginning. The secrets I had uncovered, the trust she had placed in me, and the lessons about humanity and power were threads that would soon weave into a narrative far larger than any I could have imagined. I had crossed a threshold, and there was no turning back. The journey, I sensed, was only beginning, and the world outside these walls would never be the same for me again. The night had grown deeper, shadows stretching across the ornate hallways of the palace. I had begun to think that no event, however astonishing, could possibly surpass the revelations I had already encountered. And yet, fate has a way of unraveling in ways that defy logic. As we walked back to the main hall, the Queen paused near a window overlooking the sprawling gardens. Moonlight poured in, casting silver patterns on the marble floor. She looked at me, her expression unreadable for a moment, and then she spoke, her voice carrying a weight I had not heard before. "Not everything here is as it seems," she said. "And not everyone you meet tonight can be trusted. There are those who observe, who wait for a misstep. You must understand, your presence has set things in motion that cannot be undone." Before I could ask what she meant, a distant sound caught our attention, a soft, almost imperceptible click. We both turned, and in an instant, a figure emerged from the shadows. Cloaked and silent, they moved with precision, their intentions unclear but undeniably dangerous. The Queen's eyes narrowed. "This is why I brought you here personally. You are now part of a story that is larger than yourself. Watch, learn, and most importantly, act when needed." Heart racing, I followed her as she led us through secret corridors I hadn't noticed before. The air was thick with anticipation. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of movement heightened the suspense. Then, abruptly, the Queen stopped at a door marked with an intricate emblem. "Inside," she said, "lies a truth that has been protected for generations. You must decide if you are ready. The choice is yours." I nodded, steeling myself. Pushing the door open, we stepped into a chamber filled with artifacts of immense historical and mystical significance. Scrolls glimmered with gold ink, ancient weapons gleamed in the candlelight, and in the center, a crystal orb pulsated with a strange energy. It was mesmerizing, hypnotic even, as if the room itself demanded reverence. Suddenly, the cloaked figure appeared again, closer now, their presence threatening yet strangely familiar. I realized that I was no longer a mere observer. I was part of a living narrative where every decision could tip the balance of power. The Queen turned to me. "Do not fear. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Tonight, you will witness secrets that will challenge everything you thought you knew. And when the moment comes, you must act, for hesitation could cost more than you can imagine." And then, in a heartbeat, the cloaked figure lunged forward, but the Queen, with a grace and swiftness that defied her age, intervened. A brief struggle ensued, movements so fast that my mind struggled to comprehend. Yet in that instant, I felt a strange surge of clarity. The danger was real, but so was the responsibility placed upon me. When the chaos subsided, the figure was gone, leaving behind only a folded note, addressed to me. Trembling, I picked it up. The message was cryptic, hinting at allies and adversaries within the palace, the fragile line between trust and deception, and the fact that my accidental presence had become a catalyst for events that would ripple far beyond this night. The Queen placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You have chosen well, by staying, by learning, by trusting. But the night is far from over. Every choice you make now echoes into the future. Be vigilant, be wise, and remember, you are no longer just a visitor. You are a participant in history." As the first light of dawn began to peek over the horizon, I realized the truth. My life, once ordinary and predictable, had been irrevocably transformed. The accidental seat beside the Queen had thrust me into a world of intrigue, courage, and discovery, and the story was far from over. The twists, the revelations, and the destiny that awaited me were just beginning, and I was ready, or at least as ready as one could ever be. Dawn arrived quietly, as if the world itself was reluctant to disturb what had unfolded within the palace walls. Pale golden light filtered through the tall windows, illuminating the grand hall where everything had begun. The guests were gone now, the music silent, the echoes of laughter replaced by an almost sacred stillness. I stood alone near the window where the Queen and I had last spoken, replaying every word, every glance, every warning. The folded note was still in my pocket, its presence heavy, as though it carried more weight than paper ever should. I had not opened it again since the chaos of the night, afraid of what further truths it might reveal. Footsteps approached behind me, measured, calm, unmistakable. I turned, and there she was. No crown, no grand procession. Just the Queen, standing as a woman who had lived a lifetime of duty, sacrifice, and quiet strength. "You stayed," she said simply. "I didn't know how to leave," I replied honestly. She smiled at that, a real smile, free of ceremony. That is how history chooses its witnesses. Not by blood alone, but by character. She gestured for me to walk with her one last time. We moved through a side corridor and entered a small, sunlit room I hadn't seen before. It was simple, almost humble. A wooden table, a few chairs, and shelves filled with books rather than artifacts. It felt human. "Everything you saw last night," she began. "The secrets, the danger, the power, none of it matters without people who understand why it must be protected." She looked directly at me. "The greatest mistake the world makes is believing power lives only in thrones. True power lives in choices." She asked me then to open the note. With steady hands, I unfolded it. There were no threats this time, no riddles. Only a single sentence written in plain ink. "The future is guarded by those who remember the past, but live for others." I looked up, confused. "What does it mean?" "It means," she said softly, "that you were never meant to stay here." For a moment, disappointment flickered through me. Then she placed something in my hand, a small insignia, simple and unmarked. "This is not a symbol of authority," she explained. "It is a reminder. Wherever life takes you, you will see the world differently now. And that is enough." There was no oath, no dramatic farewell. Just understanding. Security escorted me out through a quiet gate, far from the main entrance. The city beyond the palace walls was already awake, buses moving, people rushing to work, life continuing as if nothing extraordinary had happened. And yet, everything had changed. In the weeks that followed, I returned to my ordinary routines, but I was no longer ordinary inside. I noticed things I had ignored before, the weight of responsibility, the quiet dignity of service, the unseen sacrifices behind visible success. I spoke less, listened more. I judged less, understood more. Sometimes, when headlines spoke of the Queen, her speeches, her public appearances, I would smile, knowing the humanity behind the image. Knowing that power, at its best, is gentle, watchful, and deeply human. People often ask me if the story is true, if I really sat beside the Queen, if she really took my hand and told me not to get up. I always answer the same way. Yes. And no. Because the real story isn't about a seat beside a queen. It's about what happens when an ordinary person is trusted with an extraordinary moment and chooses to become worthy of it. And that choice, I've learned, is available to all of us.